So here is how I lost $2.5 million at the age of 22. So in the summer of 2023, my former co-founder and I were accepted onto a program called Y Combinator, which is like a startup accelerator in San Francisco, where a lot of big companies have been through before. For example, like Airbnb, Dropbox, Stripe, Monzo, and like tons of other names you might recognize in the tech space. And basically, when you're accepted, nowadays you get $500,000, and on top of that, usually in demo day, the average company raises about $2 million. So that's why it's $2.5 million. And basically, we were accepted onto a program, and we did it for a couple of weeks, only for everything to go to shit. So I hope you can learn something from my experience for when it comes to startups and businesses and just generally working with people. So when I was 10 or 11 years old, I watched a movie, The Social Network, which is about the founding of Facebook and like the story along the way. And basically since then I had this kind of dream or like idea of starting an app or like business in the future and having it grow massively and like spread to hundreds of millions of people around the world and everyone to be using my product or whatever. And this was kind of in the back of my mind throughout high school and then also university, college. And then after college, about like a couple of months after, I had an opportunity where me and a friend at the time were able to, we had an idea of like starting a company, and she was like more of an influencer at the time and I was like more of a programmer. So I was really good at programming because I had been programming since like the age of 8 or something. And she'd been vlogging throughout university and grew to like over 1 million followers during university. So it's kind of obvious that one person will work on the technical side and the other person will work on the marketing side. So yeah, basically we ended up having an idea for like a co-studying platform where people could match one-to-one with each other and then like study together on the platform. And we ended up building like a prototype or like an initial version, applied to a YC, and then we had an interview with YC. But often what happens in the interview is like they ask you whatever ideas you have, especially in the application form, because sometimes people apply with an idea that they're not really excited by, but they still like the founders and they'd rather have them work on a different idea together. So I remember during YC, one of the group partners saying something about how like 3 PhDs, physics PhDs applied with an idea for a dating app. And then they were accepted and then they were told like, hey, you should not be working on a dating app because like you have no advantage in this particular area. So you should work on like a business physics related idea instead, because of course like you have PhDs, so you're better suited to that environment. So yeah, basically the person who interviewed us, like he kind of pattern matched us to like a previous company that he funded, which is often the case in venture capital where they see 2 people who seem similar to like people that they've seen before who are successful. And it ended up being like settling on like another idea, which was kind of like a Patreon, like Substack, like creator economy related thing for like East Asia and like basically most of Asia in general. So yeah, then we ended up getting a call back, which is what happens when you're accepted, and they were like, we don't like the previous idea, do you want to work on this new like creative related idea instead? And we were like, sure, let's work on it. And then we flew to SF and like we did a couple of weeks of Y Combinator, and then like things kind of collapsed from there. And like the main reason this comes down to like a lot of early stage startups, what often happens is it isn't because the startup like runs out of money or they couldn't get the idea to work, because they can always pivot to another idea. It's most often disagreements between co-founders of they don't like get along with each other, or they can't decide on their direction or like how the business should run. Like I think most early stage startups, the reason they fail is because of the co-founders themselves, not because like a competitor ends up like building a feature that completely wipes them out. And what happened in my particular case, to put it loosely, is that when you apply to YC, you don't have to have a company incorporated, and they will help you with the incorporation of the company. And basically we were still like dealing with the incorporation of the company like a couple of weeks into YC. And then when it came to finally signing the documents and like putting down the equity split, my co-founder at the time, she wanted to bring her dad onto the company. And her reason or justification was that during university, she had started a similar business to what this is, but it was like more like creating merchandise and like creating merchandise for her own brand, and her dad helped her a lot with that. And she kind of saw like what we were doing as like a continuation, because it was also related to creator stuff, as a continuation of what she was doing during college, which her dad was helping her with. And I saw what we were doing as something completely different, which wasn't related to manufacturing or merchandise at all, and it was like a completely new business idea, which is like entirely software related. Whereas she thought it was like merchandise, which was complemented by software, so the software wasn't like the big aspect of it. And ultimately, because her dad is like really experienced in merchandise and had been doing it for like 20-30 years with factories in China and stuff, she wanted to bring her dad onto a company. And then for us to be given like one fed equity split instead of 50-50. And I was kind of like, oh, like this is not what I want to do. Like if you want to bring your dad on, then you should like give him like half of your equity instead. Because I don't want to be in the position where like a family member and someone else like own like, well, 2 family members basically own a greater portion of the company than I do, because I can be kicked out of the company quite easily in the future. And I would have not minded if it was someone else who was really experienced in merchandise if I genuinely believed we needed it. But it was more of the family relationship where, like, I don't think anyone should be in a position where you have two people who are, like, say, married to each other or, like, family, basically owning a larger fraction of the company than you personally do. Because, of course, no matter what argument ends up happening is, like, the two family members are going to side with each other and potentially kick the third person out. So it may well have been the case that if I agreed to do this, then we would have continued to build this, and then, like, something may have happened, like, 2-3 years later where we disagreed on something and then I was like forced out of the company because I didn't own a majority share, and of course two family members would agree with each other on whatever like big decision happens. So yeah, ultimately like it's something I didn't feel comfortable with. I expressed this and then like she didn't see my side of the argument and then we just didn't incorporate. And of course like if you don't incorporate a company then you just aren't part of Y Combinator. Like you need to have a company to do Y Combinator. So we ended up leaving like I think 5-6 weeks into a batch or something, but I think during that time it was still a really good experience. But I think what it means is like personally you and your co-founder relationship are perhaps the most important thing in the company, and if that doesn't work out and if you can't agree on something, especially something which is like pretty foundational or trivial, like putting down the equity numbers on the like actual company formation like table paperwork, then that's like a pretty big problem. I think another lesson from this is like don't always take someone at face value of what they say, in the sense like I explicitly said, oh, so do you want to end now, or like if we're not incorporating then we should just end things, and she was like yes. And then of course like sleeping on it, like later, like a few days later you end up changing your mind, or you like actually deeply think about it. So rather than having the decision made in the moment of like whether you should end things, I think it's better to like let it kind of sit for a few days and then to decide whether or not to actually end things, or whether you can actually get someone to change their mind. So yeah, this failure story basically came from like a difference of expectations of I didn't want to be in a company where we were bringing another co-founder who was a parent of an existing co-founder, and she didn't see a problem with that, and she saw the company as a continuation of what she was doing in college with her merch brand, and I saw it as a completely different new company. And I think when you're so caught up in like building the product, you end up forgetting to have these like high level conversations about what this actually means, or where we're going with this, or what we're building and who should be involved, because you're so like quickly trying to grow your revenue or whatever else as quickly as possible. And I think in some cases like you can really navigate those decisions quite easily with your co-founder, and in many cases you may not be able to do so for whatever reason. So I think my main two takeaways from this is like it's better to have no co-founder than like a co-founder you don't get along with or disagree with, or like someone who's just a bad co-founder. It's better because you can just start a business yourself, and many people who do this. But of course it's still better to have a good co-founder than not having a co-founder at all. And I think another lesson is that even though there are movies like The Social Network where it shows like Mark Zuckerberg starting Facebook at 19 or whatever, like many people don't need to start a company at such a young age. You can like go out and get industry experience. You can start another company which actually makes like a lot of revenue up front, so you can like be liquid in terms of like $1 million, $2 million or something, and then you basically have enough money where you're set for life, and you can start a new bigger company in the future. And you can also start a company like if you have kids and a family and stuff like that in the future. I know like the CEO of Vercel is like a cloud like infrastructure company that has, I think it's like worth a couple billion, and the CEO is like 35, 36, and he has like 3 children as well. So he manages to be a parent and like a CEO of like $1 billion company. So yeah, like you definitely don't have to start a business if you're like very young. I know given how much like problems can end up happening with startups, like if you want to be liquid, like have a couple like liquid hundreds of thousands or millions, and that's more important for you, then you may be able to do that for your other means instead of doing a startup. But of course I think doing a startup and having a hyper growth company is like one of the best ways of becoming like a billionaire. I guess one lesson here, because many of my subscribers are still in university, is that if you're in university, it's really important to find good people that you can work with long term on various projects. And one way to find this out is to like work on them with various different ideas, whether it's group projects, or you can even try making some money together where like over summer you can say to a friend of yours like, hey, let's try and like sell like 50 different products this like summer, or like let's buy this inventory and then try and sell it, or like let's build like a small software and try and like get subscribers for it or something. Basically like finding people you can work with together and work with and make money with is usually a really good sign that you may be able to start a successful company with them in the future. And finally, as the one caveat for the title says like I lost $2.5 million at the age of 22. Often when people make videos on YouTube of like, oh, I made $5 million last year, or like made $2 million last year, they didn't make the money themselves, in the sense they don't have 2 million liquid in their bank account, often it's the company did revenue of $2 million, and then they might have invested it all back into a company, in which case they actually made zero themselves in their own bank account, or they like took out like 10%, which is still a lot of money, I guess, in some cases. But basically many titles you see on YouTube where it's like, I lost $5 million, I made $5 million. It's not that they lost the money, it's the company that they had lost the money. And in the case of Y Combinator, when you get accepted, you have like $500,000 that they give you as like an investment, and then on demo day, which most companies do, I think the average Y Combinator company raises like $2 million, $1.5 million, around about that amount on demo day. Some raise much more, like 4 million, 5 million, 6 million. So I took like the average number of like the 500k, the 2 million, 2.5 million, and basically we didn't end up getting the 2.5 million because even though we were accepted onto the program, we left before the end of the program because we couldn't agree on like who would be on the founding team cap table, like when it came to registering the company.